Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Audit and Resources Scrutiny Committee. This is being broadcast and recorded live on Microsoft Teams. My name is Councillor Steve Holes and I shall be chairing the meeting tonight. During the meeting, councillors will be speaking, members of the committee you see on your screen now. We will also have officers presenting the items from Eastleigh Borough Council, and they are on your screen now. If we experience a connection problem, this event will be paused. If a councillor loses connection or joins later, I will ask them to introduce or reintroduce themselves at appropriate time. In the unlikely event of myself losing connection, the Vice Chair Alex Bourne will take over. So the first item on the agenda is public participation. I'm not aware of any member of the public who has indicated they wish to speak, but I do know that we have Councillor Grzeski in the room. So Judith, if you have any comments to make during the meeting, please indicate in the chat and we'll pick that up. Judith, do you have anything to say at this moment? Okay.
Not at this moment, thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Do I have any comments? No, I can see some shaking heads, thank you. Do I have a proposer? I need a proposer. Thank you, Ray. Councillor Dean, and a seconder, Councillor Bruce Tennant. Thank you. All agreed. I will take silence as agreement. Thank you. That's agreed. Item 3, apologies. I am not aware of any apologies tonight. We have a full committee. Item 4, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate in the meeting chat. When called, please wait for the red box before starting the nature of your interest. I think we'll move on to item 5 then. Item 5, impact of COVID-19. I will ask the Chief Internal Auditor, Joe Cassar, to introduce item 5. Joe.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, councillors. You'll see from my report that we've already provided 2 detailed reports to Cabinet. So this report provides you with copies of those reports in appendices A and B, and also provides you with a bit of an update on what the internal audit team have been doing in the last few weeks and how it's impacted on us. I mean, obviously things have completely changed for us. The audit plan was put on hold as soon as we went into our response mode. We provide a role of oversight advice on risk management, control and governance arrangements, and we have done just that. I'm a member of the Strategic Incident Management team and the Tactical Response team, so I've been kept well informed of what's been going on across the council, and I've been able to advise on new processes that have been set up in response to COVID. Paragraph 15 talks about me producing a revised plan. Of course, the last few weeks our time has been spent elsewhere helping support the response. Therefore, that's impacted on the team's capacity for completing the 2021 audit plan. At the moment, we're focusing on completing the 1920 audit reviews so that I can write my annual opinion and present that to you in July's meeting. I'm happy to open up to questions, please. Councillor Tyson-Payne.
Good afternoon. No, good evening. I have a number of questions and I'm not sure if these need to come to you or if they need to go to Sarah. So the first question I have is...
Sorry, Councillor Tyson-Payne, I'm really sorry to interrupt. Can I ask a couple their cameras off because I can't, we're having a problem sending you live. Apologies for interrupting. There we go. Thank you.
Is that better? Okay, so I have a number of questions. The first one is, it was a recent interview with the Chief Exec in which he mentioned that there was £200 million, he mentioned this figure to the media of items that are in our asset portfolio. I wanted to know what this referred to, what this figure was. I suspect that's a question for Sarah.
Hello, yeah, Sarah King, Chief Financial Officer. Thanks, Councillor Tyson-Payne. Yes, the 200 million that the Chief Exec refers to is to do with our investment portfolio, so it is all our property assets. So it's the value of those assets.
Okay. Can I speak? Yes. So the question is, what are those investments? Are they inside the borough? Are they outside the borough? And how have they been affected by COVID?
Okay, so the vast majority of our investments are all within the borough. We have 2 that are outside. They are investments such as the Aegeus Bowl, we have Travelodge, lots of industrial units, lots of different investment properties around the borough that you'll be aware of. In terms of the effect, currently nobody is defaulting on their payments. We are arranging payment terms with some tenants, but on an individual basis. So it's early to say because obviously we're still in lockdown and we're only just coming out of it. So what we've done is we've got a schedule of all of our different tenants to see who, so we can keep in contact with all of them and see which ones may be having financial difficulties. Currently there are none saying they can't pay, but there are a number saying that they need to defer their payments until later quarters. So we're working with each of them to work that up. As I say, it's quite early days, so we'll come back to this committee as time goes on and also to Cabinet to say what the full effect will be. But just to give some reassurance, we do have our property reserves, which it does talk about slightly in the report, to back that up should there be voids that come through we can't cover from our revenue. We've got reserves there to cover those losses.
Okay. So I'm going to speak. I haven't got a red box currently. Excellent. I now have a red box. I did say I'd ask you all the questions in one go and then failed to do that. So I'll go on with the rest of the questions and then I'll tell you when I've stopped. There is apparently £12 million that we can draw down. Where can we draw this from and how is that calculated? How many of our tenants have reported problems with paying rent? And of those that have reported problems, what is the rental income from those tenants? And then the last one is probably not COVID related, but may have, maybe. What is the value of the business rates from the airport? And that's all of them.
There we go. Right, thank you. Quite a mix of questions. I'll try and give you answers to all of them. The 12 million to draw down, I'm assuming you mean from our reserves. Yes, so we've got about 4 million in property reserves, We've got other general earmarked reserves that we can call down when we look at them to see which ones we can call on. And we're also in reserve behind that. We've got our new homes bonus money that we would earmark to cover these losses, and then we could choose to leave it there, or we could choose to repay it later should when the rents do start to come in. Just as an aside to mention, we don't have a current cash flow problem, so that isn't the issue. It's more the long-term loss of rent that could be a problem should that occur. As I said, we've got in touch with all of our tenants to see how everybody is and that everything is happening currently. Nobody is telling us they won't pay, as I already said. They're just saying they need some deferral. I think most businesses are saying that, to be honest. Those that are significant probably include those, say, Aegeus. We've set up a short deferral for those to consider a little bit later because they're part of the leisure industry. The rental of those reporting problems, I couldn't tell you without getting back to you on that. So I'd have to come back. It's worth noting that the quarter end payment came just before COVID, so lots of them paid. So we're talking about anticipating the second quarter's rent, which isn't quite due. So currently everything's up to date, but obviously we're anticipating when some may default a little bit later. And business rates on the airport, that's a nice question. I'm going to estimate about 1.2 million a year, but I'll come back to you with a final figure. Yeah, I think it's about 1.2, but I'd have to confirm.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was really on the income referring more to our housing tenants. I wondered how many, if we knew how many of them were struggling and what that value might be. And that is the end of my questions properly now.
Okay, thank you. If we're talking housing tenants, I don't have the specific split for our Eastleigh Borough tenants that go through our third companies, our arm's length companies, but in terms of council tax, we've seen quite an increase, obviously, in people who are deferring until later. We've yet to see whether those deferrals will turn into non-payment, because obviously we're being quite relaxed with that at the moment. I think we've got about 2,000 people at the moment who are asking for a short deferral on their council tax, compared to about 200 in normal years. So there is quite a mix there.
Right, question from Councillor Atkinson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I've got a few more questions than Sarah had, or Sarah, I beg your pardon, had, and so hopefully you can bear with me. But first of all, can I just say, can this committee offer our thanks to all members of staff for the sterling work that they've done in dealing with this crisis. I know it's been a tremendous effort and drain on all of them, and I just wanted to say thank you. And also for maintaining the services as well as they have done. So perhaps we can record that, Chair, if that's possible. I've got various questions, and I've got quite a few surrounding the Small Business Grant Fund. If I ask all of them, and then perhaps I think it'd be Sarah who might be able to respond. Now, for those that don't know, I'm actually a chartered accountant, and therefore I've had a lot of clients involved in this particular grant fund, hence some of the questions, because they relate to problems that I've come across as dealing with my clients in this aspect. Now, firstly, on the 24th of March, the government announced details of the business support grant, the Small Business Grant Fund, and in that they said that businesses need not apply for them because the grants will be paid automatically by local authorities. Now, I'm just wondering why it therefore took Eastleigh Borough Council to the 20th of April before they actually wrote to all the small business who qualify for small business rate relief to invite them to make the claim. There's clearly a delay of nearly a month there. Now, I am aware that there was information on the website, but I'm also aware that several of my clients, not having received any communication from council, were very concerned and just thought they didn't qualify. So I just wonder what the delay was there. The second query relating to that related to the actual form that was required to be completed, which did initially contain a lot of information that was actually superfluous to the requirements under the government scheme. I know I had several discussions with Sarah about this, and it's ended up now that only the asterisk boxes need to be completed. But I'm still coming across clients who are being told that they still have to complete every box before they will get the grant, and this again is delaying the grant being processed and therefore monies being given. Now, in view of the extra data that has been collected by Eastleigh Borough Council, some of that is highly confidential and sensitive relating to their individual businesses. Can we be advised what's going to happen to that data? Because clearly there are GDPR issues there as well. And I just wanted to make sure that it will be properly deleted or erased or whatever way you want to do it in the course of time. Which sort of leads me on to the top up local business grants, which is again a grant aimed at small businesses, but is quite separate from the Small Business Grant Fund, as it's directed to small businesses who didn't qualify for the first grant. A little bit complicated, so I apologise for that, but hopefully I've made that clear. So I just wondered now what Eastleigh Borough Council was doing to advise those small businesses who are quite, as I say, quite separate, as to when they can claim this additional top-up grant, what form they're going to have to complete to do it, how that will be publicised, will Eastleigh Borough Council write to those individuals and advise them to make it, or suggest they might like to make an application. And linked with this is the fact that it is discretionary, and a discretionary business grants policy was agreed at Cabinet on the 21st of May, unfortunately prior to this meeting, because normally we would scrutinise policies. But I did wonder, under the grant policy, I can't see any right for the applicant to make an appeal if they've got a problem. Who has the final say on awarding grants? And also, who actually gives the points, and will there be any due diligence applied in these applications? Because clearly people are desperate, their businesses are falling over, their income has gone off the face of a cliff. They want some money, and I quite understand that, but equally we have to be careful because we are providing grant money from government sources, and we need to be sure that it is applied correctly. Chair, would you like me to stop at that point to deal with all those issues? Because I've then got some more issues regarding financial implications and some other ones.
Thank you. I think that batch is enough to be going on with just for now. Yeah, so if we pick up business grants, you're right, we did put forward an application style system, as did many councils, and that was allowed as part of the government guidance. The reason we did it that way was to try and get as much from people as we could, as quickly as we could, because we could advertise on social media and get hold of all of our contacts as quickly as we could. Partly because the post service, as many of you will already realise, is a little bit unreliable at the moment because of the situation. So if we'd just written to people, they could easily have not got the information. So we tried to open as many channels as possible. We were then flooded with data and information to process. While we were working that through as quickly as we could, we then moved to write to all businesses so that we could mop up those last few that were coming through. As for the form to be completed, we try to get as much data as possible. We've made that clear on the form. So yes, there are asterisk boxes of what you must complete if you want to claim. The rest of the data has been really useful. It's given us a bit of a profile of the borough businesses, where the problems are, and also it's going to help us now with a top-up grant that you spoke about, Councillor Atkinson, for the other small businesses who unfortunately have fallen through the gap. So we now have a collection of data that we can now refer to those people and go back to them and say, you didn't qualify, however, now you may well qualify. And for those people, we've already got much of the information. Regarding your point on confidentiality of data, we did have our data protection officer review the form in detail before it went live, so they're happy with that, and the data will be dealt with in line with the normal retention and destruction of records policy. What other bits? Oh, and so now we'll move on to the top-up grant that's been awarded by the government, which will be just under about £1 million, we think, for us, 969,000. So it's already live on the website, I believe, following the announcement of the policy and the ratification of that at Cabinet. So people can already apply. There is no right of appeal, which is quite clear in the policy, and the policy has been developed in line, just for information, with all the other councils in Hampshire as well. So although they're not identical, they are similar, and I believe all of them say there is no right of appeal. As for the final say, if there was any disagreement, then it would come to me for final ratification. The due diligence we're working through is we have our finance team working through and considering, and also our economy team working through and considering. We'll compare both lists, and if there's anything that falls through the gap that they don't agree, that's when it will come on to me. So we've got two teams working on that, and the aim is completely to get those claims processed and paid out to businesses as soon as we possibly can, because we're very conscious how important it is to the small businesses in the borough to be able to keep in business and keep going. So I think I picked up all of your points, but please correct me if I didn't.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you picked up most of them, and thank you for some of the clarifications that you have given, which is very helpful. I think the only point you didn't come back on, you said the system is live on the website, but will you be writing to the other small businesses in addition to just putting it live on the website? Because some clients won't necessarily be aware that this might be something else that they could apply for. Do you want to just answer that? Then I'll come back on my other questions that I've got.
Yes, sorry, I did miss that one. Yeah, so the aim isn't to write to all businesses, because we don't necessarily know which businesses we've missed, because they're not on our rates system. They're not always rateable businesses, but we are trying through all of our networks to get hold of as many businesses as we possibly can. So if there are ones any of you think that we may have missed that you can point our way, please do. But it's very difficult for us to be able to identify all of those businesses simply because we don't have the data.
Thank you again for that clarification. Perhaps it will be published in Eastleigh News or similar as much as possible, because obviously small businesses, as I said earlier, are pretty desperate for this sort of funding. Thank you for that. Can I raise some questions under financial implications now, if I may, particularly the medium-term financial plan, which appears on page 30, then again on page 50 of our documents. What I was interested in is the change from page 30 version, which I think was produced around about April, and the page 50 version, which is produced for May 2020. I think I'm correct in saying that. And it seems that there is a reduction in net service provision of about £425,000 between the two documents. For some reason, I don't think it's likely to be as a result of increased rental income, for obvious reasons. So I'm just wondering where that reduction has come from. And I did wonder whether it was anything to do with the grant that has been given by government for COVID-19 cost issues, which I think from memory is about 1.4 million that this council will receive. And that is to be split between council and parish councils, again, as I understand it. And I therefore wondered if the 1 million was going to parish councils, or perhaps you can explain that a little bit better. And if it's not going to parish councils, can you please say what parish councils are likely to get and how that would be allocated? Shall I just carry on for a bit, because there are a couple more questions sort of under the MTFP. Looking at the longer term implications, it's difficult to predict, but presumably surpluses in 21-22 and 22-23 that are predicted reflect the 1.4 million reduction in pension costs with Hampshire County Council, and hence we're getting a bit of a bonus for those 2 extra years, as well, of course, as the year we're currently in. So if you could just confirm that, but we then start heading into deficits, and I think it's probably too far to go into detail on that one, but it is worrying to see that that line in the graph. Can you tell us how regularly MTFP will be updated in view of the rapidly changing financial climate? And please, can you also tell us what the current and expected borrowings are of council as a result of this emergency? What are the anticipated monthly costs to council of COVID-19? And can you give any indication of what might happen if you have to use New Homes bonus monies, as suggested earlier in the paper? What effect that may have, particularly on building of new housing in the borough? Thank you.
Sorry, Sarah, you that whole answer was muted.
I'm sorry, Laura, and it was such a good answer as well. I'm going to try it again. Yeah, so medium-term financial plan, just to reassure, we update it constantly. So whenever something new comes in, like we've just heard, we've had another 118,000 from government on the High Street Fund to make them safe when we come out of lockdown as retail starts to open again. So we'll be updating it again based on that. So although members might see it at Cabinet each time, be reassured that in the background we're updating it all the time as soon as we find things out that are significant. You're right, it has moved from April through to May, and the majority of that is because we got 1.8 million from government in the end for our small business rates. So it's come from a result of that and some other things that we've known along the way. So but that is the majority of it. We have said that we'll work with parishes, and it's great because the majority have come back to explain to, they've written to me directly to say what the direct costs are that parishes are incurring, and also indirect, so losses of income going forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to assimilate all of that data, and then when we get to the end, we will see what the impacts have been on all of us across the sector, and the hope is that Hampshire County Council will also come in, because obviously they also received a tranche of grant, and between all tiers of local government we'll be able to allocate funds out appropriately so that we're all recompensed in some way for the losses that we've incurred along the way. Long-term implications, you talked about, yes, the position improving, and you're right, that is because we've put into there the additional pension contribution, which is 1.4 million a year for 3 years. So yes, that's in there. And then you're right, the picture does start to worsen a little. I would agree with you that it's quite far into the future. So the point of this plan is that we can see what's coming and head it off and plan. And if you've seen previous medium-term financial plans, they've all kind of said the same thing, that in the future things are not looking as rosy, and then that's why we have that time to plan to turn that around. So it doesn't overly concern me, but it is a flag for us to make sure that we're on track. So by the time, I'd like to think by the time that another year passes, you'll see that position more positively again. Council borrowings will be about £500,000. We haven't done that much borrowing actually on the back of COVID. It's helped that the government's given us that additional funding. So that helps us in cash flow, because to be fair, the government have been quite speedy in getting that cash through to us. So that's helped us with our cash flow. So we haven't had to take out that much additional borrowing. You've asked about monthly costs of COVID. I would say the costs probably are more losses of income, and the main one that springs to my mind currently is car parking. So I'm talking about losses that won't be recouped. So we may have delays in council tax and delays in rental, but I don't count that as a loss yet until it becomes real. It's just a cash flow issue. So probably car parking is our biggest impact. There's loss on the Point and the Berry, unfortunately, which have had to close as our cultural venues, and also Itchen Valley Country Park and Lakeside. So there's those losses, which I would estimate probably about 30,000, 40,000 a month maybe, but I can come back to you with a breakdown if that would help, so that you can see how we've analysed that. And then the last point I think you've picked up is, so our backstop with our rental, which I don't think we'll need to use, but just in case, is the allocation of new homes bonus monies. So currently we use a lot of that money for capital projects, but primarily for our housing schemes. The monies we're talking about here that we would earmark are monies for the future. So this wouldn't affect current schemes that we've already committed to. So this isn't switching funding. This is new funding coming in that we may apply to new projects. We would first apply to this should it be necessary. So I hope that makes sense, and I hope that answers your questions, Councillor Atkinson.
Thank you. Yes, Sarah, thank you very much. Chair, I have one more question on this section. Can I ask it and then allow those everybody else that wants to come in? All it is, it's paragraph 12, page 11. This is a question for Joe, I think. I was just a bit concerned to see that you've recognised that some controls require relaxation, and having been an auditor, I'm aware that controls are put in place usually for very good reasons. So I would like to know what controls have been relaxed and what actions you're taking to check and prevent any significant issues arising from the lack of the existing controls being in place. Thank you.
Thank you. I sort of preempted your question, Councillor Atkinson, and did double check today. And the controls that were relaxed were all around when we were in the office and we hadn't closed down the office. So we had instances where we didn't have enough staff to open the safe. So the controls around opening of the safe were relaxed slightly. And we moved from a daily cash up to a weekly cash up. So I think it was all things that at the time were reasonable and I felt were appropriate. And since then, I'm not aware of any other controls that have been relaxed.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. That does relieve me quite a bit. I had imaginings of all sorts of things. So thank you, Chair, for allowing me to ask all of those.
I think Councillor Trace has got a question now.
Good evening. Well, Councillor Atkinson just got mine with the last question there. I was asking about paragraph 12 as well, whether there was a review process for the changes to make sure that the relaxations aren't opening us up and whether they'd be modified. But if there aren't any, then presumably there's no need for that at the moment.
Thank you. I think Councillor Grzeski's got some questions now.
Yes, thank you. Just one question for the moment, and that is, my understanding is that some districts who've been administering all of these grants with government money have experienced a proportion of fraudulent claims, and I wondered what measures East Borough Council had put in place to spot fraudulent claims, and what proportion of the claims they've received do you suspect have been fraudulent?
Yes, thank you. So it's worth noting that of all the claims that we could have paid out to all the small businesses, we could have paid all the ones on our database and 100% paid them within 1 week. We didn't do that because, exactly your point, some, it's not necessarily just fraud, some would potentially be fraudulent claims, and some would be where people just aren't eligible and would claim erroneously. So that we haven't done that. What we have done is work very closely with the internal audit team to make sure that our systems are in place to make sure that we can check each claimant before it's paid, and we've got quite a robust checking system all the way through. So currently I'm not aware of any fraudulent activity. No, and Jo is shaking her head to confirm. So currently we've not identified any, but we will stay mindful of it. Also worth noting, the government's put in a system that we can use to double check all of the claimants. So we're using that as well, which is called, I believe it's called the Spotlight system. So we're also double checking against that. So we're very mindful that speed is of the essence to pay people, but also paying the right people is really important.
Thank you.
I think Councillor Bourne has a question about borrowing, please.
Yes, hello, good evening. Has the fall in the interest rates assisted the council's ability to borrow more short-term money if required?
Well, it's ironic, isn't it? Because the interest rate has fallen, but when the COVID issues first arose, the price of short-term money went up because it's supply and demand, isn't it? So we were very fortunate in that our Treasury team moved really quickly to borrow some money, which was slightly more expensive than we have done previously, but marginally so. The important impact is more the long-term impact on the interest rate. So longer term, with the interest rate dropping, that's been really helpful to us actually, and it helps our medium-term financial plan because it remodels our interest rate over time, and because we are a net borrower, that will help our revenue position going forward. But yeah, the initial impact was not as positive as you would have thought on short-term borrowing, but as I said before, we didn't really have a cash flow issue apart from the first week or two, so it hasn't really caused us an issue.
Thank you. Sorry, just a couple more on the various subjects in the report. Resources were directed to the homeless. Can we now confirm that there are no homeless people living on the streets of Eastleigh?
I'm going to speak in the hope you can hear me, even though I can't get the camera to go live, but I can confirm there are no cases. We did have a long-term case of homelessness within the borough, but we were very fortunate that our team worked really hard with the lady concerned and managed to get her into temporary accommodation. Oh, there I am. Yes, managed to get her into temporary accommodation. So currently there are no cases. As they come through, we address them as soon as we possibly can, but there are no cases of street homeless at the moment.
Brilliant. Thanks. Sorry, my signal went a bit funny there. Oh, hello. Sorry. Leisure Eastleigh, it's been closed for many months. Will members be getting refunds, and will this affect the council's finances?
Your reception went a little bit there, but please nod if I'm right that you were talking about Places Leisure Eastleigh. And yeah, great, thank you. Yes, so Places Leisure suspended membership straight away. In fact, they were one of the first in the sector places for people to stop memberships. And I believe they have suspended payment, and they would refund people if they did a full year. They would refund them for the proportion they're not using. The impact on the council on our budget there shouldn't be an impact. We're paid a management fee, which is still due to us. And in the contract, we've had discussions with Places for People, and although obviously we're sympathetic and we want the leisure service to come back as soon as we can for our health and wellbeing priorities. Contractually, I believe they're still obliged to pay the management fee, so that won't be an issue. The issue would arise where we are also within the contract due a proportion of a profit share, which currently, obviously, loss of revenue for Places for People means there'll be less profit share, but as it was in the first 3 years of operation, we haven't budgeted for that anyway. So budget, it will have an impact on us because we won't receive the profit share, but it won't be an impact on our budget currently because we haven't budgeted for it. Thank you. I don't think there are any more questions from members. So probably straight back to the chair, if that's okay. Yep, I think that's it for questions on that paper.
Thank you both, Joe and Sarah, for dealing with those great questions. I thought members really came out with some excellent questions there. The recommendation for the committee is to note the contents of the report, and bearing in mind this is ongoing and there will be continuous monitoring and it will come back to us with an update in the future. I would firstly ask if I would have a proposer for that and then a seconder. So a proposer, Rob. Seconder, I'll take Wayne. Thank you, Wayne Irish. And before I just ask if there's any further debate, I would say that yes, we will definitely put in the minutes that we thank the staff for all the hard work that they've been doing during the COVID-19 outbreak. So can I have anybody who wants to add anything and carry out debate? No indication. In that case, it's been proposed and seconded. We will take a roll call of all members in favour.
Councillors, when I call your name, can I ask you to unmute your microphone and just give me an indication if you agree with the recommendation? I will take you alphabetically, starting with Councillor Atkinson.
Agree.
Councillor Bourne.
Agree.
Councillor Dean. Councillor Dean.
Agree.
Councillor Holes.
Agree.
Councillor Irish.
Agree.
Councillor Manning.
Agree.
Councillor Rushton.
Agree.
Councillor Tennant.
Agree.
Councillor Trace.
Agree.
Councillor Tyson Payne.
Agree.
That's all in agreement, Chair.
Thank you very much, Laura. In that case, we'll move on to item 6, which is the scale fee for 2020-21. I will ask our Corporate Director, Sarah King, to introduce the item. Sarah.
Oh, again, I don't think, oh, here we go. Right, so thank you very much, Chair. So in a minute, I'll pass over to Janet Dawson, who's our partner with EY, who are our external auditors. I'll just introduce briefly to explain that this item on the agenda is a letter from the PSAA, who are responsible for our external auditor appointments, and they set the scale fee, so how much we pay for our standard external audit service, and they do that across all of those councils that were part of that tendering process. Members will be aware, members of this committee, that due to the complexity of our accounting transactions, and we have quite a few that are a little unusual, we would expect a variation in that fee. And we're working with EY and PSAA to come up with a fixed fee going forward. So it will be more than the scale fee that you see here. But we're negotiating together so that we can come up with a fixed fee to give the council some comfort and EY some comfort that we're paying the correct amount for the level of complexity of our audit going forward. I'll stop speaking now because Janet has a lot to say on it, I'm sure. Over to you, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for introducing me on that. Yes, my name is Janet Dawson and I'm the EY partner, and I lead the team who provide the external audit opinion on the accounts. Sarah's right, this is the letter that sets out from PSAA what they believe the indicative scale fee should be for 2020-21, and they write to you in advance of that year to give you a view. In fact, this year in their letter they've gone to a lot more detail about changes that have impacted on the amount of work that's required to be done by external auditors across local public audit. And both, as Sarah has discussed, the specifics around each organisation where they set a fee, where there is a wide range of different complexities depending on the organisation's arrangements, but also they've talked about the changes in regulation and compliance that we are required to meet as a part of our regulatory framework that we operate in with the Financial Reporting Council. And so what they've done is actually set an indicative fee at a level which is the same as this last year and the year before, because their point is that until we talk to you, the council, and then to PSAA, they have very little understanding of the detailed individual amounts and risks and key issues that are affecting each organisation as part of their contract. And that's quite a shift in their position. I think in the past they believed, and certainly when they were part of the Audit Commission, that they could set a range of fees across England which would roughly equate to the amount of work that's needed to be done. But actually they've realised in the last year or so that without that detailed conversation with us and between us and yourselves, they are struggling to be able to set an indicative fee without that level of detail. The other point that they have in their letter is around the change to the National Audit Office Code of Audit Practice that comes into effect in 2020-21, which affects in particular the value for money arrangements work that we do. And at the moment, the NAO is working through exactly what that detailed guidance needs to look like. They've changed their code, but that will require a different scope of work. But at this point in time, that hasn't been determined between the NAO and auditors. And therefore, the indicative scale fee also doesn't take that into account. As we said, I think at the last meeting where we were there in person, we feel that we've worked really closely with the officers at Eastleigh, and we're actually in a very good position because we've got a good understanding with Sarah and her team about the scope of work we need to do, what that costs, and we've already moved in 1920 to set a fee that reflects the amount of work that's required, and so we'll continue to do that for 2021. But just to say that number in that letter will change because of your own arrangements and the amount of work that we're required to do, as well as the NAO code change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Janet, and indeed, Sarah. I will now open it for questions from members. If you have a question for either Janet or for Sarah, and then we'll move on to other matters. Any questions?
Chair, I'm trying to speak, but it's not sending it, so I don't know quite what's happening. So I left my mic on to try to be able to speak, but I did type it in, and it's not. Obviously, the
it's not on chat.
Councillors, I think we are having a slight technical lag. I think we are at peak internet usage time, so just bear with me us a second, please.
Shall I carry on speaking, or do you?
Yeah,
is that all right, Chair?
You're currently live, Councillor Atkinson, if that's okay with the Chair.
Thank you very much.
Yes, that's fine. You carry on.
Thank you, Chair. One question on this, but I've got some questions under agenda item 7. And I don't know whether you want me to put them together because it's all to do with our external audit. Shall I do that? Would that be helpful? If you nod, Chair, then I can see whether. Or
can I suggest that you keep to item 6 and then bring the other questions up in item 7?
Thank you. In that case, audit was on item 6. It says in the letter that as an authority we have to publish draft financial statements by 31st of August. Can Council please tell us when we're likely to publish our 31 March 20 accounts? I presume it will be before that date as it normally is, but have we got an indication yet of when the accounts will be published? Thank you.
Here we go. Right, it's me again. Yes, so our aim is to publish the accounts. It would be very nice if we could get our drafts published by this Friday, but realistically we're going to aim to get them all published by the 19th of June, the draft statement, so that we can give a whole month's public inspection period. That's not going to impact on the external audit timetable. So all things being equal, and I'm sure EY will echo this, EY are in throughout July for about 3 weeks, give or take. We'll have prepared all of the testing evidence that we think is necessary from the council's perspective. So hopefully, all things being equal and no hiccups along the way, and there weren't any at the interim audit, then we should be on course to publish our accounts on time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson. I think we keep looking for red boxes and we don't always catch them. I will then open it up to any other further questions from members. I've got nothing on the meeting chat. Everybody happy? Okay, do I have a proposer that we note the report? I've got Wayne waving, so Wayne Irish, thank you very much for proposing, and Adam Manning has indicated he seconded it. And we have to take a roll call of members if there's no further debate. So Laura?
As before, councillors, if you could indicate as I call your name. Councillor Atkinson.
Agreed.
Councillor Bourne.
Agreed.
Councillor Dean.
Agreed.
Councillor Holes.
Agreed.
Councillor Irish.
Agree.
Councillor Manning.
Agreed.
Councillor Rushton.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Agreed.
Councillor Trace.
Agreed.
Councillor Tyson Payne.
Agreed.
Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, we move on to item 8 now, which is, beg your pardon, item 7, which is external audit progress. And I would ask Simon Matters from EY to say a few words. Thank you, Simon.
Hello, Chair.
Hello.
Hi, thank you. So nice to see you all. And to start with a bit of a progress update on where we are with the audit. So we did our initial interim visit on the period up to lockdown, so just before lockdown. So for the first 3 weeks of March, we came in and we did our interim work. That went very smoothly. So officers continue to serve us really well. And we achieved essentially all that we wanted to achieve in that first interim visit. We then agreed with officers that we would come back for a further visit in April, so during lockdown, to further progress the interim work. And this was a really good example, I think, of officers talking to us and basically saying, these are the things we think we can get done now. These are the things that we can get done early, and we'll work with you to do that. So just a feedback that is very good practice and has really helped us. That week in April went really well, which bodes very well for the future because we were working in this environment. So we were working remotely, we were working using Microsoft Teams and other technology to be able to deliver the audit as we ordinarily would. And again, things went very well. We got through the work that we'd intended to. Officers had a very clear plan about what they could deliver early and then organised themselves in an environment when we're in lockdown, when things are much more difficult, to be able to deliver that. And they did that successfully. We then also delivered our side of it and what we wanted to do. The positive, and it's a big positive, and it's good to draw on positives at times like this, is that we take that forward into year end. So we have had a week with you working virtually, so working off site, working remotely, sharing evidence remotely, and working with the finance team to get things done remotely. That went very well. So I would suggest that that bodes well for the full year end visit when in all probability, we may still be working in this kind of environment and not be able to access the council physically, access evidence physically, and all of those things. It's kind of proved that we can make this work. I would say the key to that is the level of communication that we had. So during that week in April, we had a daily meeting with officers to catch up. We had a clear plan of work before we went into that visit. We monitored against it on a daily basis. We talked. The thing that can go wrong in this situation is a lack of communication and a left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. That all worked remarkably well. So I suppose it's a big thank you from us to your finance officers for allowing us to work like that. It's positive in that it shows that we can work in this environment going into what will be a challenging year end for everybody, and that bodes well for the future. There is, I would say, as a point of comparison, that if I compare where we are this year to where we were at an equivalent stage last year, we are slightly further forward. So despite the fact we have needed to work remotely for 1 week, we are probably slightly better progressed than we were last year. And we did, we worked hard with your officers to deliver on time last year. So all of that bodes well. I suppose the big caveat going forward is it's going to be a difficult year end because of the impacts of COVID-19. So what does COVID-19 do? It introduces significant uncertainty, and listening to the discussion that you've just had, you're clearly cited on that. You've been asking questions around some of those key uncertainties. So it's all gone really well so far. We're slightly ahead of where we were last year. Officers have worked very, very well with us, and that's great. Bodes well that we can run it in a lockdown environment, but C19 impacts are going to add some significant challenges to the year-end visit, which leads into our next item. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on progress to date before I go into that next item.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions from members? I've got no questions indicated on the chat.
Sorry, Chair, yes, I can't get my chat line to work. I've got speak in there and it's not doing anything for me, but as I say, it's probably telling me to shut up, but there we go.
Okay, Councillor Atkinson, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. If I could ask, are we still on course to finish the audit work? I think it was originally scheduled for 31 July. I know that there has been a relaxation in that final date given by the government, but are we still scheduled for 31 July, or what is the next scheduled date? I also have been asking and not sure that we've had a reply as to whether we've got to prepare consolidated accounts this year. Has that been resolved? And can I ask whether the external auditors are having to make any additional checks to ensure that a Section 114 notice wouldn't be applicable for this council? Thank you, Chair. Thank you,
Margaret. Simon.
So to take those questions one by one. So in terms of the first one, our resourcing is programmed, as Sarah suggested, to do the substantive work by the 31st of July. However, I do think there is likely to be some uncertainty at that point in time still. So given that we have longer deadlines, as has been suggested, it's probably important that we use that time to reflect, to make sure that we are giving you a safe opinion. It really all depends on, where we are at that point in time. But in terms of delivery of the substantive work, yes, we are aiming to get the substantive work done by the 31st of July. As you can appreciate, internally as a firm, it's likely this year with C19 impacts, there may be matters that we need to consult further on. Certainly when we get to the next paper that we intend to present, we'll walk you through very quickly some of the areas of the financial statements that will be impacted by C19 and where some uncertainty will be introduced. The relaxation of the deadline, we don't want to use as deferral of the work. We want to get the work done to the deadline. But it's useful, I think, to have that buffer there to deal with any uncertainty should any arise when we delivered that substantive work. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. I think the second part of the question was on group accounts. So we're not expecting you to prepare group financial statements at this point. The third part of the question was around Section 114 notices. Clearly that's something that we need to consider at Eastleigh, like we will now at every other council. Whether you apply for one is a matter for you, and we've heard you talk about the medium-term financial strategy, the revisions that you are making, and certainly in the short term, it doesn't look like you'll be in a situation where you can't set a balanced budget. But having regard to the robustness of those medium-term financial plans, testing them thoroughly, testing the assumptions that underpin them, and being comfortable that they are reasonable, noting that there is a very high level of uncertainty, is something that we would absolutely want to consider as part of our value for money work.
Thank you, Simon. Any other questions?
Chair, can I add one further one, if I may? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Sarah mentioned earlier that we have unusual accounting transactions, which I think we've all recognised from the past. Do we know yet what extra audit costs there'll be to deal with those unusual accounting transactions? Thank you.
Simon.
So we've provisionally agreed a variation to the scale fee for this year that we've referred to in the item on the PSAA correspondence. That was reported in the audit plan, so that came to the last meeting of the audit committee that we attended. So there's the estimate of what we think the additional fee will be in there. Clearly that's something that we need to keep under ongoing review as we progress through the audit, as we ordinarily would. But it's something that we will obviously talk to officers and the committee about on an ongoing basis.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Simon, have you got anything else you want to say? Okay, here we go.
So not on progress to date. I have the next item on COVID-19 impacts on the financial statements. Would it be helpful if I went into that now?
Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you will have all received the additional paper that we've produced, which is essentially a list of some, but perhaps not all, of the potential impacts of C19 on your finances, and therefore how those finances are reflected in your financial statements, and the things we will need to do as your external auditor to get assurance in each of those areas. So to just quickly run through those, and some of these you've touched on in the discussion that you had earlier in the meeting, but probably helpful to run through them again. So going concern, obviously that's very relevant to the discussion that you've had already in the meeting and your medium-term financial planning. So the financial statements are produced on a going concern basis. So there is an assumption that the council will continue as a going concern. Clearly, financial pressure on the council and the level of financial uncertainty created by C19 will impact on that. We're in no way saying that the council would not be a going concern. What we're particularly interested in is the adequacy and sufficiency of the disclosure that you put in the financial statements on that, and the work that you've done to satisfy yourself that your finances, that you will be solvent and liquid over the medium term. So revenue recognition, there are obvious impacts here around, council tax collection, business rates collection. Again, you've talked about some of that in the previous conversation that you had as part of this committee. Again, something that we'd need to consider, and I suppose all of that and any potential impairment does again relate back to going concern. Commercial activity and the assets that the council holds. So as already been touched upon in the meeting, the council is involved in a relatively significant level of commercial activity. That means it has a disproportionately large asset base relative to its spend and relative to most other councils of the same tier. Because they are commercial assets, many of them are based on market values. So you look on wider market evidence to inform the valuation of those assets. Clearly, C19 has introduced significant volatility into markets. Therefore, it is inherently more difficult to value those assets. The valuation of those assets is highly meaningful because they do then relate to future income streams for the council, which again plays back to going concern. So this is an area that we're going to have to look at in some more detail. The one thing here is, I suppose we only went into lockdown on the 23rd of March and financial year end is the 31st of March. So the impact at year end may not be that great. It's something we need to look at on a, an asset by asset basis, but certainly there is relevance to going concern, and there is relevance to the post balance sheet events disclosures that you make in your financial statements. Your operational assets, so these are the assets that you actually use to deliver services, not the ones that you hold for commercial return. Again, C19 might impair the service delivery potential of those assets. That would need to be accounted for appropriately. Pensions, so pensions are based on primarily on investment values. Investment values have been impacted heavily by C19. So therefore, the pensions asset and net pensions liability that you account for in your financial statements is potentially impacted. Receivables, so your debtors at the end of the year, clearly C19 will place many bodies into a more financially challenging environment. They may not be able to pay their debts. So thinking very clearly about your provision for impairment of those receivables is an important area for us. Holiday and sickness pay, so we've gone into lockdown, that may well have changed working practices, so accruals around leave and around pay may be impacted. Government support, so you are getting some specific government support to help you through these C19 times. Again, that's a new transaction stream. That's something else we'll need to consider. And then I suppose to overlay all of that, your annual governance statement. So how has C19 impacted on internal control? How has it impacted on your finances? How has it impacted on your overall operations? And therefore, what do you want to disclose in your governance statement on those issues? I would say that these issues are not specific to the council in many cases. The one area which is probably more relevant is the commercial activity, because you've got more of it than most. But most of those areas are of generic application and would be impacting all councils at the moment, but are absolutely areas that we must consider in our audit. And if we're going to give you a meaningful audit opinion, consider thoroughly. So I suppose at this stage it was just a heads up to give you a flavour, I suppose, of what's on our agenda and the things that you need to be thinking about also in relation to your role as those charged with governance as they pertain to the council's financial statements. I will stop there, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. That was very helpful. I have two speakers wishing to pose a question, I would guess. I will start with a member of the committee, and then I'll invite Judith to speak afterwards. So firstly, Margaret, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. It's more a concern, really. I wasn't aware that there had been an additional agenda item from our external auditors, and certainly I've had no papers for it, nor is it on ModGov. So this particular agenda item, I haven't seen any of the backup paperwork for. Could we please have it sent to us so we can review, and if there are any questions relating to it, because obviously I haven't considered it in detail, can they be relayed to our auditors for answering later? And incidentally, my speak line is still not working, as you probably gathered. Thank you.
I have a... Go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that it was we received it when we received it. We sent it round. Obviously, we needed to read it through, so EY sent it through, and it was emailed to all councillors on Friday evening. And yeah. I can see in the chat that a few have said they've received it, so I can check, Councillor Atkinson, whether you were on the circulation. But I'll email it to you right now, actually, because I've got it on my other screen. So
it's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I now move to Councillor Grzeski. You have something to ask. Councillor Grzeski?
Grajewski. Yes. I'm frantically looking through my emails in case I missed it, but it was a report for this meeting. So why was it not put onto ModGov, please?
Councillor Holes, I can answer if you'd like me to.
Yes, please.
I will apologise that it wasn't put onto ModGov, but unfortunately with Nikki and I being the only two members of Democratic Services at the moment, we got it and we sent it out the quickest way we had, because we are both running to keep up with virtual meetings. We can put it on ModGov as a supplementary agenda item now. Unfortunately, we just wanted to make sure you had it in time for the meeting, which is why it was sent out via email. So apologies, but we are running to keep up with everything at the moment.
Councillor Grieski, you want to come back?
Yes, I mean, I'm just trying to understand. I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but how long does it take to put things on ModGov? I mean, I remember late papers being issued for Cabinet in December 2016 at the Aegeus Bowl, I think we were, or the hotel next door, and the papers were issued at 4:30 in the afternoon, because it was about car parking charges in the centre of Eastleigh. It was the Cabinet meeting before we had a local plan meeting that evening. So, you know, that was got out really quite late, whereas it seems that you had this to email on Friday and yet not enough time to get it onto ModGov. I mean, does it take a long time to put things onto ModGov?
Councillor, Sarah, you want to come back?
Yeah, I'm holding. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that there are only two in Dem Services at the moment, and I'm kind of picking up Laura's point that they've been working extremely hard to get all the committees going, and also Laura's not very well. So I think for this instance, although it's unfortunate, I think she can be excused this time. So it is unfortunate. We will get it on ModGov, but I can send copies to both of you now. But in Laura's defence, she's working through a chest infection and just come back from an operation where she's been off for 2 months. So I think she's doing a brilliant job just getting all this together, to be honest.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Okay. Can I have a proposer that we note the reports? Members may not be keen to, without seeing it, if they haven't, the second part of the report, but certainly a proposer for the first part, and if members are happy, the second part. I've got Sarah is the proposer, and the seconder. I got Wayne Irish. Thank you very much. All members happy to note the report, and we'll do a roll call, please.
Okay, as before, councillors. Councillor Atkinson.
I will agree to the first part, but I will have to abstain on the second part because I haven't seen it, so I can't really comment on that.
That's fine. Councillor Bourne. Councillor Bourne. I think Alex might be having some connection problems. Councillor Dean.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Councillor Holes.
I have read the reports. I'm happy.
Councillor Irish.
Happy with it.
Councillor Manning.
Agreed.
Councillor Rushton.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Happy with both reports.
Thank you. Councillor Trace.
Agree to both.
Councillor Tyson Payne.
Agree to both.
Councillor Bourne, you seem to have dropped out when I called your name. Are you happy with the reports?
I am, yes. I've gone for 1 minute, sorry.
No worries, that's fine. I thought that might have happened. Thank you very much, councillors.
Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on now to item 8, which is the verbal update from the 3 groups that we have member representation on. So we will start with Councillor Tyson Payne speaking on behalf of SRMG, which is the Strategic Risk Management Group. Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, so the Strategic Risk Management Group met, I'm just trying to find the date, the 14th of May. I have to say I was particularly pleased with the update that I got. A number of things that we had discussed in the past had actually been adopted. There was now a new risk management register specifically for COVID-19, which is managed by the Strategic Incident Management Team, which Joe referred to earlier. They regularly review this register. Actually, they do it 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday and Friday, which I thought was extremely good, and I have a tactical meeting on a weekly basis. They have now a local response centre which also meets 3 times a week, and they are in the process of planning for recovery. So that all seemed extremely good. The tree policy had been updated and adopted by the management team, so that was good. I'm just going through my notes as we listen. Yes, all of that seemed extremely good. Health and safety policy had been updated and emerging risks were put on the planning for recovery register. The only other thing I did raise under business continuity, which I have to say has been extremely good in this recent events. However, I did make the point that it was extremely good for everyone except councillors because we didn't have access to IT. So that will be added to lessons learnt at a later date. The other item that I had raised at previous SRMGs was the fact that the CEO is part-time. This has been raised a couple of times by me. I am assured that all delegated powers are in place and working well. It has been checked by legal to make sure there are no constitutional issues, and discussions have proved that leadership is ongoing and good. And that is my update. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Members, do you have any questions for Sarah's report? No questions. Okay, thank you very much. We then move to Procurement Executive Group, and that is Councillor Atkinson or Councillor Irish.
I think it'll be me.
Well,
Councillor Atkinson
got a very good reporting, so I'll bow to her superior there and the marvellous work she's done.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you for that, Wayne. I'm not. Anyway, I'd like to hear the report first. But first of all, members of the group, we're very pleased to welcome Lucy Dodsworth, who's Procurement and Insurance Officer, to her first meeting with PEG. Delightful officer, and look forward to working with her in the future. The last meeting of PEG, believe it or not, was the 10th of September, and a lot has changed since then. We've not just with the coronavirus issues, which have taken priority with council work, but also Lucy's new into role and needing some time to familiarise herself with outstanding matters. So I'll briefly go through a flavour of our discussions. We looked at our procurement action plan and the key points that we want to make sure are followed up before the next meeting. Our measures for climate change impact on procurement still in development, but delays due to C19. Recruitment for procurement post has taken place and all duties for procurement are now being fulfilled within council. Much of the procurement does happen by managers or officers within departments rather than a specific role. Training for councillors, including parish clerks, is still outstanding. I'm afraid that's another coronavirus casualty, but to be undertaken as soon as possible. Transparency reports for financial matters have all been published on EBC's website as prescribed by government. Annual reports for PEG. This probably was a little more concerning because it's still outstanding for 2019, but we've decided to pull the 2019 report in together with the 2020 report, so they will be prepared and reviewed at the September PEG meeting. All other actions that are in our plan are going to be updated by Lucy for the next meeting, and I'll give you a further briefing then. Procurement performance indicators, these are to be reviewed by Lucy in accordance with our strategy and policy document, and a report will be provided at the next PEG meeting. PEG members want to be able to review invoice spend quarterly as to the overall spend by general ledger code, i.e. by type of spend, and finance is to be asked to provide this report. This will then enable us to monitor trends for type of purchase and identify areas where bulk buying may be advantageous. Waiver documents have been reviewed by Lucy and updated, and these were presented to PEG for adoption. And I have to say the updates Lucy made did make the waiver document much clearer, and we actually then went ahead and approved the new document. Lucy also presented us with a new form which is very similar to the waivers form, but in fact related to where a contract requires an amendment, and therefore this form will be used where it's to be applied, which is in rare cases, and again this was agreed by PEG. The T's and C's for procurement are under review because they need to incorporate the implications of the Modern Slavery Act, GDPR and any C19 issues. On sustainability, Jason to provide full updates to the next meeting, and again delayed due to his work on C19 issues. We considered settlement of invoices and noted that PEG is continuing to work, EBC is continuing to work towards settlement of supplier invoices within 10 days. Where EBC is outside settlement terms, interest is paid to the suppliers, but only when requested. Cash flow at EBC is not being adversely affected by settlement of supplier invoices within these timescales. And I think Sarah mentioned earlier that cash flow at the moment for EBC is not a problem. So those were the main points of the meeting. And Laura, you don't need to worry, I can send you a document so you can put it into the minutes to save you typing rapidly. But if there are any questions or if Wayne wants to add anything, please do. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Can I ask Wayne, did you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to say thanks to Margaret. She's done a very comprehensive report there. That's certainly my recollection of the meeting. So thank you very much, Margaret. You did very well, and I was right. It was a superior presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I ask members if they have any questions for Margaret? No, a shaking of the head. Right, in that case, we'll move on to Councillor Ray Dean, who's going to provide an update for the housing group. Ray.
Hopefully I'm there.
There you go.
Yeah, basically we haven't had a proper housing group meeting since way before the lockdown, but I've been speaking with the lead on it, and we've had some updates. I had an update about 2 weeks ago, which I'll read some of, and then I've got an update. I actually spoke to Andy this morning just to get some more clarity. The basics of it is, at the start of the lockdown, some of the housing projects were basically put on hold. That was namely the Stoneham Lane projects, Kestrel Park and Pembroke Hill. Work, albeit slow, on the other two main projects carried on, which was the Romsey Road and the Horton Heath project. They slowed down, obviously, due to the social distancing requirements, limiting the amount of workforce that they could have on the sites at any time. Since then, there was a load of other information in there, but that's all been superseded now, in that in the last few days, we've now actually got all the sites back up and running, but they will not be able to operate at obviously full pace still due to the social distancing requirements. This may affect the completion dates, almost certainly will affect the completion dates on some of the projects. The scale of the slippage on this is unclear, but hopefully within the next month or two, we should be able to get a much better plan of where all these sites are going. It could have some financial implications in the long term. Obviously, one of the things that they've got to start looking at as a group is they've got to start planning for if there is a major recession or anything in the housing market. Obviously, some of those sites may need to then be either postponed, put back, and other ones brought forward more rapidly, which could be more beneficial to the council's income. If there's any other thing on the financial side of that anyone's got any questions for, Sarah would probably be the better one to ask the questions of. That's it. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ray. Are there any questions for Ray?
Yes, please, Chair. Sorry,
Okay,
I just can't get this chat box working for me. But if I could ask Ray, first of all, do we know if there are any penalty clauses on these contracts that would be invoked, or whether these the COVID virus counts as an exceptional circumstances? That's one question. And secondly, I think it would be useful if perhaps we could ask for there to be a Teams meeting of the housing group, because some of these things I wasn't aware of, and I think we all need to be involved in these discussions, as I think we could create questions amongst ourselves and make this even more informative. And I must thank Ray for the work he's done on this. But I think it'd be useful if we could arrange a Teams meeting for the housing group. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so in terms of contract, there doesn't appear to be any impact at the moment, contractual terms. And regarding the meeting, yeah, we can arrange a Teams meeting. That's no problem at all. I'll have to speak to Andy Smith, obviously the head of finance, to get it agreed, but we can set one up. I think originally there was we offered and there was no call, but we can get one set up. That's no problem.
Excellent. Okay. Can I ask if there's any further questions? No questions. I'm not on picture at the moment. I don't think I'm live. Need to have a look at that.
Sorry, Councillor Holes, I am trying to put you live. We have another issue with it being weak internet.
No, that's okay. We're bound to have issues, and you've done really well up to now, so don't worry about it. Thank you, Ray, for that report. And we now move on to item 9, which is the action list. I think there's only 3 items on it, Sarah. I'm looking at them. Any comments?
Yes, thank you. I can give comment on the first. Maybe Joe's probably best placed to comment on the second 2. But the first action was Hampshire Community Bank. You wanted BDO to come back.
Yeah.
To a few. That was all happening. Then lockdown happened and COVID happened. So that can happen, but I'm going to suggest it probably won't be for a month or 2 yet, till we see how we come out of this. But they're very happy to come and meet the committee and talk things through. And then probably over to Joe to pick up the second 2.
Joe?
Thank you. Right, the internal audit charter, you'll be aware that we need to get an internal assessment every 5 years, and that we're looking to do a reciprocal arrangement with another local authority. At the moment, that's been put on hold whilst we're sort of dealing with the impact of COVID, but it is something I'm going to be revisiting shortly. Just out of interest, the apprentice on our team highlighted to me last week that through the training he's been doing, that a reciprocal arrangement with just one other authority is deemed suitable. Got to be at least 3, so I assume that we would give 1, and then there'd be 3 of us in a partnership arrangement, so that we don't do another local authority and then they review us. So I'll be looking into that, but that was really useful that he found that through his training. And the strategic internal audit plan, you'd be aware that I'm working on that and looking to bring that to you in July when I do my annual opinion as well.
Okay, thank you, Joe. If we can just update those boxes so that we know exactly where we are, it'll be a help for the next meeting. Thank you. It says here that I need to have, first of all, any questions on the action list, and then have a proposer and seconder that we note them. So any questions? No? Could I have a proposer, please, that we accept and note them? Thank you, Councillor Rushton, and a seconder. And is there a seconder?
Sarah's waving frantically.
So I haven't got Sarah on the screen. Sorry. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, in that case, then our members, can you just unmute and signal agreement, please?
Agreed.
Thank you, Ray.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Anybody disagree? Okay, that's carried. In that case, we move on to item 10, which is the forward plan, the cabinet forward plan. Invite questions from members or comments from members.
Chair, sorry, I'm interrupting because it's the only way I can get attention at the moment, so apologies for that. But I just wondered if there should be some pre-decision scrutiny on the provisional outturn and the corporate performance and financial monitoring, and possibly any property transactions if they're likely to be any, which is possibly doubtful. But those are coming to the Cabinet on the 25th of June, and I wondered if they should come to A&R before then. From what I can see, we don't have much on our meeting, which is the 23rd of June.
Okay, thanks for that, Councillor Atkinson. Sarah.
Yes, thank you. So the outturn and the outturn won't be coming here. The monitoring will be going to July, and so will the outturn actually, and they will go through the Policy and Performance Committee now. So performance monitoring goes through Policy and Performance for pre-decision scrutiny, but our aim was to invite this committee, well, all members obviously are invited, but to draw your attention to it when we get to the July committee so that you can attend if you wanted to.
Sorry, did I understand that correctly? The provisional outrun and the corporate performance financial monitoring will not be going to Cabinet in June?
No, they'll be going in July.
Okay, can we have that amended? Yeah, then in the minutes,
yes.
So don't get confused, which I otherwise will.
Just sorry, councillors, the full plan has been updated, I think, online. I think you got the version just before we did it. So just to confirm, we will make sure it's updated across the two.
Okay. Anything else, Sarah?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, members. Are there any other questions? Or if not, can we have a proposer that we note?
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Manning and Councillor Trace. Thank you. Propose and second. All in favour, just unmute and say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Anybody against? Thank you very much. In that case, we move to item 11, which is the A&R work programme. Sarah, have we got any updates on that? Any changes?
I think we went through this just before the meeting, so we did send an updated one round to be published. So I think, as far as I'm aware, this is as up to date as it can be.
Yes.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure that I've got an up-to-date one. One of the things I would point out, if you put the up-to-date ones onto ModGov, if you've annotated your ModGov, it doesn't show within that annotated copy. So I'm not sure whether I'm getting these updates. I can't see any updates on ModGov either. So I'm a bit confused by all of that. Perhaps, again, we could have it circulated so we could check we've got the most up-to-date version. And
sorry, Chair, just to confirm, we did send a supplementary agenda around last week, and we did do a notify email to all committee members and all councillors, in fact, so everybody will have had the updated work programme. We understand from ModGov trainers, if we send a notify email around, it will put it in your list in ModGov, so you should have it. Unfortunately, I don't think it's supplementary or annotated copy, but you should have it in your list in ModGov, and you did all get an email.
thank you for that, Laura. Maybe I'll talk to you afterwards because something's going on that my ModGov isn't picking that up. So I'll talk to you afterwards about that. There's clearly, I've got a problem there. Well, I'm not, something's going on. But I'm not sure which version, therefore, I'm looking at. But all I would say is that we don't seem to have an awful lot going on when was it? It was on the 8th of the 9th, I think it was. There was one meeting that I was looking at. I can't even remember which one it was, but what I wanted to know was if we're looking at the audit results for the year to 30th of March 2020 in October, will we be looking at the accounts or reviewing the accounts prior to that? Because I can't see it on the work programme.
Okay, Sarah.
Thank you. Yes, so the accounts will come to you. The annual statement of accounts comes on the 27th of July on your programme. It's the second item, so yeah, you'll be seeing them then.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. I probably missed it in somewhere in all that confusion, so thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, members. Can I ask a proposer to that we note this, please, just for the record? Can I have a proposer? Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, I can see you now. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Rushton. Can you unmute yourselves and all say yes if you're in favour?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Anybody against? Silence, so that's good, so that's carried. Okay, we now move on to item 12, which is exempt business. We need to consider whether to pass a resolution for item 13, the staffing report, and whether it should be exempt from disclosure if the public interest in not disclosing the information outweighs the public interest in doing so. May I have a proposer to pass the resolution?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Irish, and seconded Councillor Bourne. All in favour? Please unmute yourself. Oh no, sorry, we're going to have a roll call on this one, Laura.
And as before, Councillor Atkinson.
Agreed.
Councillor Bourne.
Agreed.
Councillor Dean.
Agreed.
Councillor Holes.
Agreed.
Councillor Irish.
Agreed.
Councillor Manning.
Agreed.
Councillor Rushton.
Agreed.
Councillor Tennant.
Agreed.
Councillor Trace.
Agreed.
Councillor Tyson Payne.
Agreed.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And I would like to thank anybody who has been listening and anybody who's taken part in the meeting who isn't a member of the committee or a councillor. We will now be going into closed session, and members, you will need to switch out of this meeting and enter the new meeting.
Oh,
I believe.
How do we do that?
Laura, would you just explain it?
Yes, councillors, you have been sent a separate invite for the closed session for a Teams meeting, so you will all need to use your toolbar and hang up from this session. We'll give you a few minutes to enter the separate invite, which has been sent separately as a Teams invitation in your diary, and I think it is called exempt or closed session.
It is.
I believe Councillor Manning wants to speak.
Councillor Manning.
Thank you, Chair. All it was to prefer my deep gratitude to Laura and Nikki for all their hard work during this recent crisis. We've seen an unprecedented crisis where thousands and thousands of people have sadly lost their lives up and down the country, and they've been doing sterling work in helping the council move forward. In particular, they've really helped me today understand how to use this particular piece of software. They've taken time out of their very busy schedule, so I'm deeply grateful to them and thank you ever so much. Thank you. That was it. That's all I had to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manning. I think Councillor Holes has already left the meeting, so if you'd all like to hang up, I'm going to end this session and we'll see you over in the other session.